Hello, everybody at BAHACON. I am so sorry that I couldn't be there. I was really looking forward to this. Unfortunately, some health issues have made that impossible. I'll talk about that briefly. This is all very weird for me. I've been in the community and the movement for 20 years now, and I've only had to cancel this event, one event earlier this year, and all of the rest of the events for this year due to health stuff. So I've been very fortunate, despite having some fairly serious health issues. I'm okay. This isn't serious or deadly. I'm actually continuing to get better and improve. I just saw my doctor on Wednesday. She praised my numbers. Basically, we found an issue with my medication. I had triple bypass surgery a year and a half ago, and I'm diabetic. And because I live in the wonderful United States of America, that means I spent many years without any actual health insurance or health coverage at all. So some of this went untreated. And as we adjust my medication, it just is not possible for me to do long travel and be around crowds for the rest of this year, but things are improving. Enough about that. I'm looking forward to being very well and being able to travel next year. But this is a very weird thing. Oh, hi. Yeah, you. Could you move just... No, I'm just messing with you. I can't see you. This isn't live. It's very frustrating because I do everything live. I remember when Seth and Aaron and I went to Australia to do the Unholy Trinity tour down there. And my first presentation, I had kind of overworked it and I didn't feel like it was right. And so I rewrote the notes on the plane and did it better in both Brisbane and Melbourne. And I live doing almost everything live. I do live call-in shows. I do live debates. I take Q&A. Hell, I do Twitch gaming live and things like that. So I don't have your reactions to feed off of today, and I can't look around the room to find out who's actually paying attention, who's asleep, those sorts of things. And I don't know when you're applauding or when you're laughing, so I'm just going to have to try to, I just won't be funny. And I won't say anything good, and then I don't have to leave any space for pauses or laughters. Or I could just have like one of the organizers, or maybe Seth Andrews or somebody get up there and push pause on occasion if you happen to laugh. I would have loved to have been able to come up there and meet many of the supporters, many of the people that I've known online over the years. But honestly, I would have been much happier to meet those of you who are at this event as your very first secular event, because the people who have been watching and supporting for many years are wonderful. You're the reason I have whatever limited health care I have right now. But the new people who have no idea who I am are the ones that I'm most interested in meeting, because that shows us that the movement in the community are continuing to grow and to draw in new people. And that is more important now than ever. For those who don't know, I'm going to give a little bit of backstory on me, if you're not familiar with who I am. But I don't ever like to make these things about me. I just want to make sure you get some history. And then I'm going to look back at the 20 years that I've spent in this movement with my thoughts on, have we made things better or worse, and what's left for us to do? And how do we fix all the problems in the world? And probably in about 35 minutes, you guys will have a working plan to go forth into the world, fix the whole world so that we're all 100% perfectly fine by next year, plus or minus 50 years. For those who aren't aware of who I am, I'm Matt Dillahunty. Some of you may know me from the many debates that I've done, from being on a number of YouTube programs, live, etc., things like the Sunday Show and the Hang Up, and before that, the Atheist Experience and Nonprofits and other shows. But I walked down the aisle at my family's church at around the age of 5 at a revival and accepted Jesus into my heart. My folks were already active in the church, which is how I ended up there at that age. And I had basically Protestants on my dad's side of the family and some Catholics on my mom's side of the family, some of whom later converted away from Catholicism. I walked down that aisle, accepted Jesus into my heart, and was a committed, Bible-believing, active Christian for the next 20 to 25 years. My parents had questions when I walked down the aisle. Their questions to the minister were evidently, what does this mean? Can a 5-year-old truly understand the gospel message? Can a 5-year-old truly feel a calling to accept this message? I didn't know that they had those questions. That tidbit didn't arise until they found out I was an atheist many years later, and then they told me that they had those questions. But the process for me was just normal. I was surrounded by Bible-believing Christians, and I was active in church. Now, up until I was a teenager, I really only went on Sundays when my folks would take us all to church. But as a teenager, I started to understand the gospel message better and have a better grasp on the Bible. And I realized that if I was just beginning to understand this at 13, then it's very clear that I didn't understand it at 5. And I'd like to say now at 54 that I didn't understand it at 13 either. And I probably didn't understand it that well at 25 or 30. Who knows when I'll finally understand it? Maybe they'll find a way to pull me back into Christianity. But considering the understanding I have now, I highly doubt that. But in my teenage years, I was very active in the church. I was at church Sunday morning, Sunday night. Monday night was visitation, Wednesday night services. There was youth group stuff, I think, on Thursdays. There were mission trips, summer camps. If you've seen Jesus Camp, by the way, the documentary, my summer camp was very similar to that, slightly less political. I don't remember them putting up cardboard cutouts of, Ronald Reagan. But it was just as Jesus-filled, and it was very similar in how the camp proceeded. For those who aren't aware, in the southern Missouri region and Lake of the Ozarks, there's a camp called Windermere that my father went to, and I went to as a teenager as well. After I got out of high school, I went in the Navy for 8 years, and that helped me by putting me in situations where I was surrounded by people who did not share the same beliefs that I did. There were still a number of people from different Christian denominations, but you had to come up with ways to interact with people whose political views were dramatically different, whose religious views were dramatically different. And when you're put in charge of a bunch of people, finding ways to work cooperatively is critical. And after 8 years in the Navy, I left and moved from the Norfolk, Virginia area down here to Texas, where I worked for Dell Computer for a number of years and a number of other technical companies. And right around 9/11, it struck me, I was recently unemployed because I had done such good work that Dell wasn't going to have any work for me to do for 6 months, and there was a downturn. They had to cut headcount, so they cut me. And I was very frustrated because I'd been taught that if you had a good work ethic and you put your time in, you'd get rewarded for that. And it seems that the reward was me being fired, and it didn't make any sense. They gave me a severance package that let me not work for over a year while I sat there and tried to figure out exactly what I should do now. And I genuinely thought that God was punishing me. When I was growing up, I was not just active in the church, but really active to the point where I know for a fact that my mother and a number of the people at church, including deacons at the church, were expecting me to go into the ministry. And I was expecting me to go into the ministry. I was just terrified of public speaking, which makes my life now incredibly ironic. I remember there's a debate of mine that you can go look up between myself and Mike Lacona, where we debated the resurrection here at Austin Baptist Church. And there were multiple people from my church when I was a teenager who heard about this debate and flew down from Missouri to attend this debate. And this wasn't the first debate or the biggest debate. It just happened to be, I guess, the first one that was in a Baptist church that got publicized. And they came down to watch the debate. And I remember one of them got up during the Q&A, and you can go watch this online, introduced himself as a deacon from my former church, and basically was like, hey, we expected you to go on to great things for the Lord. What happened? And as I've joked many times, I wanted to say, well, I went on to great things, just not for the Lord. But instead, I gave them the answer of what actually happened. I took this stuff seriously. I never had a bad encounter. I didn't become an atheist because I got mad at God. I didn't become an atheist because I got mad at the church. I felt that I had backslidden, put my career in front of my faith, and that God had finally said, no, I told you what to do and you're going to do it. And when I took it seriously and spent the next year and a half in incredibly serious prayer and study, I came out the other side of that as an atheist. And it wasn't instantaneous. It was difficult. But unlike a number of atheists, and everybody's journey in deconstruction is going to be different, but unlike many of the people that I talk to and counsel on occasions, I didn't suffer through this process. It was liberating. It was invigorating. It was all of these things that you feared about being watched and having a God, judging you all the time and everything. All of that went away. And it didn't give me license to go be awful or hedonistic. It just made me free. It just made me able to live a life that was good, that was focused on good. And I came out a better person top to bottom, even though I'm miles from perfect. I've been active in the movement for about 20 years, hosting multiple call-in shows. I'm no longer with the Atheist Experience or the Atheist Community of Austin, but I'm still doing the Sunday show, the Hang Up, other things on the line, as I mentioned, and a lot of debates. And debates are what I'm primarily known for. So I did want to touch on debates for at least a little part of this. I have a Patreon. This isn't an advertisement. Screw it. It is. Go give me money. Give me money. Patreon.com/Atheist Debates. And what I do is I post about 4 videos a month. This will be one of the videos because there's actual work here involved in kind of assessing the value of this. But I do a number of different debates, and I try to do a debate or 2 every month. And then in between, I'll do reviews of those debates as well as individual videos on a variety of topics, because I can't not do that stuff. I have 2 upcoming debates over the next 2.5 weeks, and they are both with Muslims. My apologies to the organizers. I have no idea what language I'm allowed or expected to use. Hopefully I'm not about to trash your convention, but I've been debating a lot of Muslims lately, and they're awful. Sorry, they might not, maybe I haven't had the best experience, maybe I haven't had the best examples, but generally speaking, on average, the average Christian apologist that I've debated is significantly better at defending their faith than the average Muslim apologist that I've engaged with. It's been embarrassingly bad, not just the way that they try to argue for their religion, but the things that they are willing to defend. For example, the Bible very clearly, despite assertions to the contrary, supports the concept of slavery. It makes it permissible in both Exodus 21 and Leviticus 25 and other places. It talks about who you can enslave, how you must treat them, how you can beat them, how much you should pay for them. I've gone on and on. I'm known for talking about slavery as much or more than almost anything else, because it's an obvious thing to me that should instantly disqualify the Bible as ever being called the good book. But Christians generally don't try to defend slavery and say, yes, the Bible is right to support slavery because slavery is a good thing for these reasons. There are some people who have done that. There are other people who try to soften the slavery. Oh, it was, indentured servitude and all these other things. We know what the truth is, and I've already posted a video on my Atheist Debates project that goes through all the verses relating to slavery And I just now link it and throw it up to the apologist that went, oh, no, you're trying to judge it by America's chattel slavery. Yes, because the Bible says that these people are your property that you can beat and pass on to your children. There's no way to spin that. And it's embarrassing that some of you break your backs trying to find a way to spin that. But the Muslims are a bit different. Now, on September 1st, I'm going to engage in a debate online with a Muslim on the subject of which is basically better for the world, secular humanism or Islam. Now, secular humanism as an ideal is something that I've valued and defended many times, but most of the debates that you're going to see are about, does God exist? Do we have good reason to believe in a God? Is there evidence for a God? And then occasionally you get past the generic God, which isn't what any of them believe in, and you get to some specific things like, is there good evidence for the resurrection? No. Does the Bible support slavery? Yes. It is, when we get down to brass tacks about doctrine, one of my favorite debates of all time was between two Christian apologists arguing about what the Bible meant. And each of them presented the verses in the manner that they felt justified their own position. And they couldn't show where the other person was wrong. They just showed that they disagreed. And instead of going to the same verses, they would go to the different verses. And yet they would say, oh, there's no contradictions in Scripture. Well, there may not be contradictions in those specific scriptures, but certainly there is confusion. And the notion that people are going to pretend that, oh, I'm drawing directly from the Bible and therefore I'm right, when this other person is also drawing from the Bible and therefore they're right too, and yet we somehow still disagree. How do you think we got to over 1,000 different denominations of Christianity, all of them disagreeing on some point of doctrine somewhere? You can't claim that the Bible is a clear book. Let God be true and every man a liar. It's right there in the book. Why don't you rely on that verse and realize that since it was all written by men, it's all lies? In the case of the Muslims that I've been debating, there are, the number one go-to thing is pointing to scientific findings that exist in the Quran or that were predicted in the Quran. And it's a load of nonsense. By the way, an acquaintance of mine mentioned when they saw the picture of the lineup for this year's BAHACON that it would have been nice if there were more ex-Muslims involved. I think it'd be great as well if I'm fortunate enough to be healthy and come back next year. I think it'd be awesome to be one of the only generic white guy Protestants on the panel, and we can look at a diversity of religious and former religious views, because even I, after engaging with a number of Muslims, still tend to think in terms of Christianity because that's how I was raised. We, as a secular community, aren't merely up against Christianity or even Christian dominionism. We are up against a number of ideologies people promoting on behalf of their gods, including Islam. And so learning how to reply and respond to that is more important than a lot of us thought. So next week I'm defending, or in a week and a half, I'm defending secular humanism as a value. And that's so nice because instead of defending like a null hypothesis or pointing out that you don't have evidence for your belief or that we can't confirm the supernatural or all those other things that we've done hundreds of times, I get to actually push for values. I get to push for recognizing that whether there's a God or not, it appears that we are required to solve our problems cooperatively or in conflict. And which of those two is superior? And I'm going to use that debate to prepare for the one I'm doing on September 15th. And here's where there are some thoughts that some people might find offensive. Because on the 15th, I'll be debating one of the most vile Muslim apologists I've ever had the displeasure of watching, and I've watched him several times. In addition to being just generally bad at presenting sound arguments for belief. He's also defended what he's referred to as child marriage, but what is actually child rape. This individual has sat on stage debating Christians and Muslims, and Christians and atheists, that a 4-year-old going through precocious puberty is essentially, you can't get a puberty if God doesn't want it to be the case, and so it's okay to marry and consummate that marriage with that 4-year-old. That's the individual that I'm going to be debating, and so my goal is to make this the last debate that anyone need do with this incredibly flawed human being. The fact of the matter is that by all of the best accounts, the Prophet Muhammad was a child rapist, and he has inspired a new generation of defenders of that practice. It is one of many things that my Christian apologist friends and I agree about and work together to fight. If there is a God, and it's the one that the Muslims defend, the world is doomed. But the question becomes, do debates help? I'm frequently told that debates are just a big waste of time. It doesn't change anybody's mind. And I'll agree that generally speaking, most people don't walk out of a debate with a different opinion than what they walked in with. We are very, very good at rationalizing. We are very, very good at keeping our protected beliefs shielded from inquiry. But debates do, in fact, help people. I have a bunch of emails. I would have had more emails had they not been stolen. But I have a bunch of emails from people who, over the years, having watched the debates, both the formal debates and the call-in show debates, found their way out of religious belief and into skepticism and into secular humanism. It's difficult to assess how much debates help, because there are people who aren't going to be impacted by debates. There are people who are not going to find their way out because of a debate. When I'm on stage debating someone, I'm not necessarily trying to convince them. It would be very surprising to have a debate opponent change their mind or admit defeat during a debate. It's happened exactly once for the topic of the debate during a debate with me, and that was a debate against a Satanist on the value of religion. The rest of the time, the most you can hope for is tiny little concessions at most from your opponents. But what I'm really trying to do is to reach the people who are sitting in the pews, sitting in the audience, who share those same values. Because we know that if you've made a public profession of those values, you're more likely to double down. We know that even in the face of evidence to the contrary, once you've made that public profession, you are not likely to change your mind, and certainly not publicly do it. We need to make changing minds safe, and it will never, ever be safe. So all we can do is make it safer. One of the things that I've railed on is this notion of how we educate children, because we all grow up, I think, with a fear of being exposed as not knowing the answer. Raise your hand if you know the answer. Oh, you don't have your hand up? Would you come up to the blackboard, please? Well, now it's probably an electronic screen or whatever. I'm going to age myself. Blackboard. I should have gone with a whiteboard. But in any case, this fear that we instill in people and being exposed for having the wrong answer or not having the right answer, or perhaps not having any answer at all, we have to stop that. We have to teach people that saying I don't know, especially in circumstances where it is almost certainly the right answer, is absolutely critical. Now, that doesn't mean that we give everybody a pass. You still have to do the homework. If you're in class, all of you here who are in school, if you're in school and you didn't do the homework, and that's the reason you don't know the answer, you should feel bad for not doing the homework. but you shouldn't feel bad for admitting the truth, which is that you don't know the answer. I was at times a great student and an obsessive learner, and at other times an absolutely terrible student. It's tempting to blame it on my teachers or the school system or the process by which we teach and train. I don't have the ability to blame anyone but myself. And I'm not responsible for the fact that something didn't hold my interest, that something didn't make me passionate about it. You have to find the things that you're passionate about. And I think in education, one of the things we should do, in addition to encouraging people to say, I don't know, is to find what individuals are passionate about and help them find a way to make that their future, if possible, even if it means you're not necessarily going to work in this field, but you may work in an adjacent field, or you may work in a field that allows you to do the thing you love. One of the things that I wanted to do for many, many years is breed reptiles, specifically snakes, ball pythons, etc. And now we have hatched out, I don't know, a few dozen snakes this year, and there's a few dozen more in the incubator right now. I know somebody's out there saying, see, I told you he'd talk about snakes. I'm talking about it because it's one of the things that I'm incredibly passionate about. I'm an obsessive learner about philosophy and religion and things like that, but I'm very, very passionate about reptiles and breeding and the genetics behind it. It's just absolutely fascinating to me. And if that could have been inspired in me, I could have found ways to take the things that I love most and make a viable career out of them sometime before I was 50. But I've been active in this movement for about 20 years, and I've watched plenty of instances of growing pains. It seems every few years there's this little cycle. The trend, to my knowledge, still favors the secular community. The number of secular individuals is still increasing. Overall religiosity is generally decreasing. The unaffiliated, the secular humanist free-thinking nuns, N-O-N-E nuns, are, as far as I know, last I saw data, are still one of the largest or the fastest growing religious identities. And what you see in the atheist movement is there are differences that seem to cause splits and divisions. And I want to let people know that when you see that, especially if you're new to all this, it is not only not panic worthy, it's generally a good thing. Once upon a time, the movement was so small that there were only a handful of people and you couldn't have fights or disagreement over anything. It was prime importance to stay on a very narrow track. That's no longer necessary. And the fact that there are divisions shows that the movement has expanded to the point where it can begin to be diverse, that we should still be unified in advocating for church-state separation and secular normalcy, and trying to make sure that individuals who come from a secular background aren't second-class citizens. Now, the world's in really bad shape. I remember I was sitting on stage in Vancouver just before the 2016 United States presidential election, and I sat there and said, there's no way in hell Donald Trump's going to be president. Don't worry about it. I was wrong. I've apologized about 500 times now. And we have massive issues, not just in the USA. Yes, in the USA, we have issues related to Trump, and we have lost the Supreme Court of the United States for a generation. And the divisiveness is so much greater than ever. I'm old enough just to remember when you could be a Democrat and someone you knew could be a Republican, and you could have disagreements and conversations because the things that you disagreed about were relatively minor. I mean, it was still important, but if, it's like, oh, I want to care about how we spend our money, and, we should do this, and I think the taxes are too high. I think we're shipping too much stuff overseas, or we're trying to be the world's policeman. And these were things where there was some room for reasonable disagreement. But now things have changed. After 20 years in the movement, I'm disappointed to report to you that based on my personal experience and no actual data, my phone's going to ring in the middle of recording. No actual data. There are people who think that the world is flat. There are people who think that vaccines cause autism, or that everything seemingly that they could talk about is somehow a conspiracy. We have LGBTQ rights issues, human rights issues, wars, climate change problems. How do we decide where to prioritize our focus? And if we're a community, a secular community, should we be focused at all in whether or not our money says "In God We Trust" while the planet burns? Should we be focused on our disagreements about religion while the planet burns? And the answer is yes, because we can do more than one thing at once, and not everybody has an expertise that is relevant to climate change discussions. The foundations of religion are authoritarian thinking, science denial, and assertions of moral authority, coupled with a sense that you are a sense of righteous indignation that comes from thinking that you have to save a fallen world on behalf of your God. When the reality, which we can learn from secular humanism and science and we can teach to the world, is whether there's a God or not, it's up to us to resolve our issues. We can't appeal to the supernatural. We have to cooperate and build, and it's a lot of work. It's frustrating to be in 2023 with vast technology beyond my childhood dreams, more knowledge and information than ever in the history of our species, and yet we still have disastrous issues. How is this world such a mess when we know more than ever and have more access to information than ever? I just saw somebody pointing out there's a new Google utility. I think if you go to bard.google.com, you can ask it to say, hey, populate a table with all of this particular data, and use plain language to tell it what you're looking for, and it will get the data for you. Put it right in a spreadsheet. We have new predictive language, quasi-AI things that are writing stories and poems and how-to manuals and art, creating art. How is this world this much of a mess with more access to better information than ever? We've attempted to educate people. We've attempted to work on atheist normalcy. But what's more important? Climate change, human rights, war, poverty, science education, religious freedom, individual freedom. If you, sitting out there today, have an expertise in some area, focus on that issue. I'm good at debating religion, so that's what I focus on. I wish some scientists would work on important issues like climate change instead of platforming right-wing garbage peddlers to attack the LGBTQ community. I wish political science experts would work to fix gerrymandering and inject truth back into the political realm. I wish data and technology experts would work to make sure that the information we have access to is easier to validate. There are people who think that the world is falling apart because of information overload. You just got too much information to sort it out. But these data and technology experts could make it so that we can prioritize and verify and validate information quicker than ever. I'm not just an advocate for atheism. I'm an advocate for humanism and skepticism, and we need all of those issues. We need to do much more work in improving education, and I don't just mean educating the young, although that's where we should absolutely start. We have, I'm sorry to say, a bunch of old people, including myself, who don't have a clue what's going on in the world. Just the other day in a political argument on one of our call-in shows, somebody called in to defend Trump, and so they tried to give him every opportunity. Okay, tell me something good he's done. Can't name anything. What's some policies that he implemented that you think are good? Can't name anything. What's the best example of what he did that you approve of? Well, he's patriotic. Oh, well, what about when he, trashed John McCain as I like, heroes that aren't captured, and the number of other things. They listed off all these things. The guy agreed that all of those things were negative and yet still had a massive positive perception of Trump. Now, if you have a positive perception of Trump because of things that he's actually done, okay, well, you're wrong. But at least I understand that. At least you're not absolutely oblivious to reality and just falling for a cult of personality. I know there are probably people here at the convention who are significantly older than me. And so a couple of things I want to address here near the end will resonate with you. I remember when I had to do a report for school, I'd have to go to the encyclopedia. And there were more encyclopedia volumes, both in our library and one at home, than one. I could go to different encyclopedias and compare information. And if you copied stuff straight out of the encyclopedia, your teacher's going to know. And so even if you didn't fully grasp what you're talking about, you would have to go look it up in multiple places, piece it together, and construct some new version of the sentences that are there so that you weren't just plagiarizing, but you had injected something of yourself into it. And while that's not nearly as good as actually studying a subject and having an understanding, it's still vastly superior to what we have now, except that it's not. Wikipedia is incredibly reliable. There are mistakes. There's policing going on all the time, but people are just rejecting sources. We used to trust doctors. We don't. We used to trust scientists. We don't. Flat earth, anti-vax, rejection, of soft and hard sciences. Just, nope, I don't believe that. We're caught up in a continual cult of personality where a guy who can't even stop lying long enough to report his weight correctly while he's being arraigned may still have a chance at being president despite his crimes. And since I just went and saw my doctor and weighed in at 212 the other day, and I'm 5'11", if Trump is 6'3", 215 pounds, I'll fucking vote for him. I know I'm not going to have to because that's a lie. And it's a stupid lie. But it doesn't matter because he's the man. We may be doomed, but we will not be damned. Even if we come crawling out of a war-torn post-apocalyptic cave, we need to be ready to build a future knowing what caused this. And what caused this is a mix of fear and confusion. Lots of fears. Fears of being alone. Fears of not knowing. Fears of a world that isn't what we thought it was. Fears of a world that's changing too fast. Fears and confusion about what a better world actually looks like and how to get there. I've been seeing a lot of ads lately for the Farmer's Almanac. I've known about the Farmer's Almanac all my life. It's been around hundreds of years at this point, I think it was 18th century is when the Farmer's Almanac started. The Farmer's Almanac claims that its forecasts are amazingly accurate and they correctly predict weather about 80 to 85% of the time. The Farmer's Almanac is still sold. It might be making a resurgence. At least the algorithms that we're all constantly chasing seem to be pushing it upon us because I'm seeing more ads for it. But a 2010 University of Illinois study found that the almanac was only right about 52% of the time. 52% of the time. That's a coin toss. Similarly, when the Templeton Foundation tried to study intercessory prayer, prayer on behalf of someone, they took a bunch of heart patients and they had people praying for them. And in the group that didn't know they were being prayed for, the success rate of the prayer was about 52%. And for the group that knew they were being prayed for, it was lower. And they want to claim that that was anxiety. So evidently your anxiety about, or performance anxiety about, I don't want to disappoint the world and think that God isn't healing me, actually makes you worse. Dowsing seems to work for the people who try it out, because they're not going to dig a hole for a well every time, but eventually they're going to dig a hole. And you know what? If you're in an area where people are digging wells, where there's water somewhere underneath the ground, the odds are it's all over the place. And you're going to get more hits than you do misses. There's a reason that dowsing's hung on. Religion is very much like the Farmer's Almanac. Religion is very much like dowsing. The one difference that makes it appealing is that religion seems to provide people with hope. And the fact that it is almost certainly a false hope does not diminish that people will value that hope. Right up there where I wish I was at BAHACON, my friend Dave Warnock's there. If he hasn't spoken already, don't miss it. Dave would be reasonable to hope for a cure for ALS. It would be understandable for Dave to hope for an afterlife. It would be easy to cling to. But he's not. What do we offer? What does secularism offer? I hear that question over and over again. Religion offers me hope. What have you got, Matt? Religion offers me hope. What have you got? What can I get out of your atheism? What can I get out of secular humanism? What does my position, accepting your position, how does that profit me? The hope for a better future for the generations to come is all we have. We have to be in it for them and not for us. And we have to make people aware that that has to be enough. Because the alternative is doom for us and our future generations. It's very easy and very tempting to say, well, we tried. We tried cooperation, we tried communication, we tried data, we tried evidence, we tried education, but now we've just had enough. It's time to outlaw religion. It's time to put it on the defensive. It's time to end this divisive, hateful perversion of reality that shames and marginalizes, that divides and gives false hope and gives false confidence and torments children and preys upon the weak, the helpless, the hopeless. It's time to end it, and let's do it by outlawing it. But unlike the opposition, we don't have that option. We don't get to lie. We don't get to legislate religion away, because that is in opposition to the very freedom that lets us talk about it and expose it. We also know that when you prohibit something, you make it more appealing to the people who think they benefit from it, from the people who think it's a good thing. Every single day I wake up in a world that is bizarre compared to the world that I thought I would be living in 2023. I would love for religion to go away, but I cannot sanction outlawing it. And that means we have to come up with more new, better plans. We're not in a position where we could outlaw it anyway, but we shouldn't if we were to ever be in that position. So let me leave you with this. For over 20 years, I've participated in this movement. And I hope that I'm able to do so for another 20 years because it's obviously going to be necessary. I have incredible job security looking around at the lunacy in the world and the religious privilege that put me in a position where I'm going to be defending what should be obvious to any sensible person for the rest of my life. Religious people aren't the enemy, but they are allied with the enemy. They are unwitting victims of indoctrination and misinformation and blatant lies. And we can change some of their minds, but we may not know whose minds we can change. And we can also work to change the world around them. Religion is like the Farmer's Almanac. It's right at roughly the rate of a coin toss until you get to the things that really matter, and then it's worse. People swear by it because they wrongly think that it's worked for them. Oh, it worked for me, when all they're really doing is just cherry picking the hits and ignoring the misses. Religions allow people to not have to do the hard work of thinking about what is right and what is true and what a truly better world would look like. Religions come with and build upon the baggage of broken people and broken societies and bad ideas that survived because, while terrible, they provided some benefit to someone. Ideas like slavery, piety, shaming folks, marginalizing dissenters, controlling human sexuality, controlling morality, stealing the very idea of community and pretending that it's theirs to hold. I'm sad to report that while the trend is still favoring secularity, we've had some setbacks and we need folks to continue working. So what can you do? Well, first of all, if you're able to, be out and be outspoken. Work together. There are people who are not in a position where they can be out or outspoken. There are people who cannot publicly work towards a better world, a better secular world. Run for office if you're able to. Support reasonable candidates who run for office. Donate to organizations. Not just your money. Donate your time. Protest. Set up chairs at events. Take the chairs down at events. Table at your university. Make it known that the atheist humanist community simply cannot be stopped. If they want to view us as the cockroaches of the world, that's fine. We will still prevail. We need them to know that reason, compassion, science, and sense will win out. We need them to know that we are not afraid of their gods. We're not afraid of their threats of hell. We're only afraid of the cruel and inhumane lengths that they will go to on behalf of their piety and their self-righteous attempt to defend their feckless and ineffective gods. Between now and next year's convention, make a commitment to do something. Be involved. If I'm fortunate enough to be able to come up to BAHACON next year, and we haven't met, and this is your first convention, nothing would make me happier than to go up, meet you, and have you say, hey, I heard what you said last year, and I decided to follow that advice. It's nice to meet you, but look at the community we've built, and look what this community has done. Look how we've pushed back against religious privilege. Look how we've managed to not only work forward on secular humanist issues with regard to religion, but humanist, free-thinking, science-minded perspectives with regard to human reproduction, human equality, human rights, climate change, and worked to make the truth matter again. I hope so many of you are able to say that to me next year. I am so very sorry that I couldn't be here this year. Please have fun with my other friends who are there. Do what you can to support this community, and I look forward to seeing you all next year. Have a great convention. Thank you very much.